You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
Christopher Media, let's make some noise.
Hold your ears, folks. It's showtime.
People pay good money to see this movie. When they go out to a theater, they want cold sodas, hot popcorn, and no monsters in the projection booth.
Everyone pretend podcasting isn't boring.
Turn it off. Turn it off.
I will skip the part where I brag for 3 minutes about how great and cool I am, seeing as we are all qualified young men of skill and character. People like that stuff.
Sounds good, yeah.
People like that stuff a lot.
Some people say they're a sports junkie. I say I'm a politics junkie.
The harder the conflict, the more glorious the triumph.
I'm playing this like a game. I would like very much to win. I love it, boys. I love it. Where you from?
I come from a very modest family.
I'm on the course to be the first one to graduate from high school.
I'm a progressive person, and I'm in a room full of mostly conservative people.
Our masculinity shall not be infringed.
I've never seen so many white people ever. I feel like everybody has this secret underlying need for bipartisanship.
A message of unity, as good as it sounds, is not winning anyone any elections.
Primary polls are now open.
Get yourselves ready for a turbulent election.
Whatever happens, dude, best of luck.
If you win, I support you fully.
My name is Steven Garza, and I'm running for governor.
This gets applause because...
As to the political views voiced in my speech, sometimes you gotta say what you gotta say in an attempt to win.
I think he's a fantastic politician. But I don't think a fantastic politician is a compliment either.
We're gonna do shock and awe. It's gonna be awesome.
I want y'all to take out your phones and go on Instagram. Everyone, come on.
Oh my God. Will we show the world what patriots are made of? That when things get tough, we pull ourselves by our bootstraps. One nation, under God, lovers of the Constitution of the United States of America.
That's politics, I think. That's politics.
Hey folks, welcome to a special episode of The Projection Booth. On this episode, I am talking with Thorsten Thielow, who is the cinematographer of a lot of things, including the documentary that I saw recently called Boy State. Boy State may be as unsettling to me as Jesus Camp. This is one hell of a movie, and it is really very timely. I think it'll be timely every 4 years or maybe every 2 years. I really recommend that folks check out Boy State. I think it's an exclusive to Apple Plus, one of those Apple things, but track it down. It is definitely worth it. I hope you enjoy the interview. How did you decide that you wanted to get involved in filmmaking?
I did an internship at 7th grade with the school, and the public school system in Germany makes everybody gets the opportunity to go to a real life business to get an idea of what their dream job really looks like in reality. And I interned at this small television company, and obviously I loved it. And the funny thing is that in the same building on the top floor, there lived a couple that was active in the 70s in this German terrorist group called the ARF. They were pretty aggressive. They took people hostage. They murdered a few people, politicians and business people. And this couple, I became friendly with them in that time. And what they did and how they also got away with, they ran the entire sort of publicity machinery of the ARF in that time. And they had an entire U-matic studio. So the whole AV-roll, 3-deck editing suite and the U-matic camera was sitting there, and they said, "Do you want it?" And I said, hell yeah. So my dad came to the Capitol, picked it up in a huge truck. It's a spaceship full of stuff. And I brought it back to my town in the south of Germany. And with my friends, we built a television studio. And then we got a symbolic license from the state government to run a small television station that could broadcast. We could broadcast once a week for 1 hour on Sundays afternoon. And so we would make these little vignettes and pieces about the political climate in our town. This is a town of 2,500 people at the time. They had a cable network that everybody was connected to. And so we could broadcast our own television show on a weekly basis and became incredibly popular. And it actually still exists in that town. The young people still running it.
What were you covering for this 1 hour?
The town had a lot of social political dynamics between the government, so the mayor, and the church. It was almost ruled, like secretly ruled by the church and by the priest, who was a real strong alpha male character, and everybody loved him, and he would really call the shots. And so there was a lot of that dynamic of which stores can open how long, what playgrounds are going to open, what's going to happen with the school, and so a lot of like social political drama that played out. And so we would hang out at the mayor's office and interview him and his people. We would go and do like little man on the street interviews with people that went to the baker and asked them their opinion and that kind of stuff. And then we did like branch more into doing little documentaries, which won a big award, sort of a nationwide award, and so it just took off from there.
And this was what, like mid-90s that you started doing this?
This is mid-90s, yeah.
That's amazing. So you managed to take this thing that was there when you were a teenager and actually turn it into your entire career.
That's right. And then what happened is I was so passionate about that. My father was a scientist and wanted me to go to a higher education school that focuses on physics and chemistry and biology. And I did go for a year, and it was terrible. And instead of really studying, I started a school radio, installed speakers, and built a radio station. And we would have, and the school had a radio station where we would broadcast in the recess. And so my grades were terrible after 11th grade, and my father said, okay, you're going to have to drop all this stuff, drop the TV station, drop the radio, you're going to study. And I said, I won't do that. And then he said, then you can't live in my house. And so I left my home at 16 and traveled to the Capitol, back to that guy, back to this little company. It's a 3-person company. The man who ran it was a really talented cinematographer. And first day of 12th grade, my parents thought I was going to school and I was going to behave. And instead I went to the train station and I took the train to the Capitol, and I knocked on this guy's door. I walked to his office and said, I need a job. And he had a similar upbringing and like traumatic experience in his life. So he said, come on in. And he said, okay, I will train you, but you have to edit first. So I became an editor. And this is the time where like the very first beginning of nonlinear editing. And I became very, very fast. I was so young. I soaked it all up. And then I became really successful as an editor. I edited feature documentaries for Arte. At 19, I had to lie about my age, and I loved it. And I built this whole 15 edit suite post-production house that still exists. And I ended up editing for 10 years. And after 10 years or so, I started going on trips with him, and he would train me as a cinematographer. It's a really old school German education in that sense. Yeah, that's the long story. That's the long version of it.
When you finally got out of the edit suite and started going out in the field and doing cinematography and camera work, I mean, what were some of those early works that you were doing?
Because people knew me as an editor, and then slowly begun to understand that I'm also shooting, and my shooting was pretty good because I think because of the training I've had as an editor, I knew what to look for. So people started hiring me or sending me. This is a European news and documentary network called Arte. It's a collaboration between Germany, France, and Spain and Switzerland, and they make a lot of really wonderful, high-quality documentary work, and they have offices around the world. So once they understood that I shoot and edit, they would send me to all the crises in the world to shoot, but then also to edit my own stuff. And I did that for years. Like fly to a flood in Mozambique where tens of thousands of people died, on like a 5-minute call, like, can you go to the airport right now? And then spend a month in Mozambique and documenting what's happening, but then like every few days send 15-minute mini vignettes or documentaries back to Europe to be broadcast. So it was a fascinating experience because I was able to sort of study my own shooting through my own editing for a long time. And yeah, it was a lot of travel, 50 plus countries all over the place. And it was a really good school. I think looking back now, it couldn't have been better for me to be able to learn through my own mistakes in that sense firsthand. Obviously, that was often frustrating, but it was a good way of, for me at least, the way I function and learn. It was good.
You talked about how you've been all over the world, and just looking at your body of work, it shows. There are documentaries, things set all over the place, and I'm so curious, what has been some of the most interesting things that you've done or seen over the years?
I got a call in late 2002, and I was asked, could you imagine going to Iraq for a couple of months to see what happens if the war is happening? And I said, hell yes. And I was shipped to London to train for 10 days with an organization called Centurion, and they would train journalists and anybody who needed to, business people, for hostile environment, hostile situations. I did that training and then flew straight from London to Baghdad. And this is like early January 2003. And so I spent these last months leading up to the war in Iraq, and then stayed for the war and for quite some time after. And that was just a really beautiful and deep experience, intimately following a few children, a few families through that experience, and seeing that change, seeing what a lot of people didn't see, that I feel like is still not communicated well. At least this was my personal experience, and that people were so friendly toward America and wanted this change and were hoping for this change, and behind the scenes tried to make this change. And once it happened, it was amazing. It was like children and Christmas, when the first cell phones all of a sudden were available, and newspapers from Jordan and other countries around were sold in the streets, and television sets and satellite dishes. And it was such a unique moment in time, and to be there was quite formative for me. That was a real formative experience, and that included battle. I got into sort of the wrong, got into some in some hairy situations, and it was traumatizing in a way as well to do that. And then my first big documentary that sort of made its waves and ran at film festivals was a film that I shot over a year in Mexico and Central America. Later in 2005, where we followed immigrants from Salvador and Guatemala traveling through Mexico on this cargo train. The cargo train is called the Beast, or La Bestia. And it was a journey, it was a beautiful journey and a formative experience for me to experience. People just having to run away for whatever reasons they had, and seeing what the reasons were firsthand as I experienced with them, street gangs and domestic violence and poverty, and then following them on this cargo train, on top of the cargo train, with hundreds of other immigrants throughout the entire country, and then crossing illegally into the United States and trying to make it. It was a really deep experience, and I think really informed my way of being empathetic to where people come from and acknowledging my own privilege in many ways, but it was also a really cinematic experience. That was a beautiful film.
When you start working with a director like a Eugene Jarecki or Marina Zenovich, I mean, some of these real kind of heavy hitters when it comes to documentaries, I'm very curious, how do you establish that relationship and try to figure out what they're looking for?
For me, it's a lot of listening. I really listen to the way they tell the story, to the way they see what could happen. I listen carefully in, have they made up their mind? What is it going to be? Are they curious about it? Are they open to change? Are they open to adjust our course as a story or a film develops? And I really try to make them talk about their vision, and we share references about other films and visuals and watch documentaries that we like and talk about them. But the key for me is listen to what they have to say and not come to the project with my preconceived way of this is how I want to shoot it. Really be open to how they want to shoot it and how they envision the visuals. And in documentary, that's really hard. It's so often talked about and done in narrative film, and it's wonderful to hear cinematographers and directors talk about their experience and how they collaborate on on prep and designing the visuals and tonality and color and all of it and the lighting. And in documentary, it is a really similar approach in theory, but there's the unknown. And it's so easy that you have this vision of how you want to shoot it. But then the story you started actually isn't a story. It changes. And then you have to rethink your approach. Was the visual approach my strategy in how to capture this? Was that right in the first place? But then is that still right for the story we're now telling? You know what I mean? Because a good documentary always changes. It changes the story. There's sharp turns and twists and roadblocks. And so it's tough. It's really tough. I resisted that for a long time to even talk about it because I was trying to be puristic in my youth and like, no, you can't do that with documentary. There's no way. Documentary needs to be pure, and we're not going to design this. We're not sure. And I've sort of changed course on that slightly, but it's a tough one. It's such a fine, fragile relationship between a cinematographer and a subject. I so often feel like that the way I shoot and are my shots sharp, and am I a talented cinematographer? Am I technically flawless and can follow a scene and anticipate moments and be at the right time in the right place and expose correctly and find a beautiful shot or a shot that is adequate for whatever is happening? That's just half of my rent. Really what it is to build a relationship, because none of that can really happen if you don't connect with that person. And to me, it's so much more than being a person with a camera, knowing my stuff, knowing the technical stuff, but it's about my personality and how do I talk with these people, how empathetic am I? Am I curious about their life? Do I really care? Do I show them that I care? Do they care that I care? Are they suspicious of what I'm doing? And how do I build this relationship with them that they trust me? And that they trust me specifically in the moments when it gets hard. And when their world collapses, that's when our world collapses, we shut everybody out, including our friends. Right? When shit goes down for you personally, that's really, really tough. And you don't want to put that on Instagram or put that out there. This is like this. Then it gets very fast, very private. And when somebody lets you in when their world collapses or when there's drastic change, that's really when you can see that as a filmmaker, you have done your due diligence and you have actually cared enough to build a relationship that can withstand that trauma.
Well, that kind of leads me to Boise State, and you're talking about that being there at the right time and capturing those right images. I mean, I'm very curious how Boise State played out for you. I've seen the finished product, but how was it for you actually being there and trying to capture this story?
It was a ride. It was a grand adventure. For me personally, a beautiful experience because I was involved in the film from the beginning. So we had a little bit of funding money, and Jesse Moss and I crisscrossed through Texas in a car with Amanda, his wife and co-director, on the phone, trying to go through 1,300 boys, trying to find the most interesting and compelling people without having met them, just talking on the phone. And Jesse and I would be in Houston and filming with a kid that we thought would be interesting, and then we would have got a call, and Amanda would say, "Go to Austin. There's this kid. See him tomorrow at 3:00." And so we would meet all these kids. And Cassie and Amanda, the team really did a brilliant job in casting those kids, because most of the people in the final product now, most of the characters, we have already had a bit of a relationship and filmed with before the event even started. And that was really crucial to the later relationship and to being accepted. This is how we met Steven. Steven we met in a small campaign office when he was campaigning for Beto, as Beto was running. And so we went campaigning with him, and we canvassing with him, and we saw him hanging out with the people that ran the little field office. If you have that history with somebody, it's wonderful to build on that. And then we got just lucky that Steven got as far as he got, and that he was such a compelling person. And then we quickly realized that there's no way. I mean, Jesse is a cinematographer himself and has shot some of his documentaries himself, often for precisely that reason, to be intimate and to not have a big crew. And that's how the two of us really connected, is by being small and not having a big team, but being able to just connect with somebody, not having sound people, being by yourself. And Yeah, but there was going to be no way to shoot an event like this with just one or two shooters. So we hired 7. We had a total of 7 cinematographers for the week, for the 6th that the event happened. Our strategy was to attach one cinematographer to one of the subjects. So we had 5 people, sort of like, we were pretty solid on them, and we had people attached to them, and we had floating people for emerging characters to cover events, to cover sidelines like the music competition and stuff like that. But we had a lot of shooters, and each cinematographer met their assigned subject in the very beginning, sometimes even before they even arrived. They would travel back to the town where they would board a bus, and they would film the bus ride. So they had time to connect with them and get to know each other, and then essentially wouldn't go away. They would stay with them for the entire time to really get their experience. That was our strategy. In the beginning, we thought it's just going to be them and there's going to be no sound people. So we had a microphone. Each cinematographer had a small camera, a radio microphone, and they would attach it. They would put it on the subject in the morning and then film all day. And we had to shift course a little bit in the sound thing, because there's often so chaotic situations with 30, 40 kids in a room where it was very, very hard to pick up the sound on one radio mic. So we ended up, after day 1, we ended up hiring every sound engineer, sound recorders available in Austin. And that helped. And then we just stayed on them. We, picked them up in the morning and we filmed the whole day. It was crazy wild, because neither of Jesse or Amanda could be there for all the shooting at all the time. It was just impossible. So they would have to pick who they were with to get an idea who are these people. And it was a lot of communication where we all talked about the day, at the end of the day, what we experienced, who we thought was strong, who they interacted with, who could be an additional character that seemed to be interesting. There was a lot of communication happening, and really exciting. It was really exciting because every cinematographer was excited about their subject and who they met and what they talked about, and all the deep conversations and the drama going on in their lives and in their experience. Everybody got really into it. So it was a fascinating experience, because everybody loved what they did, and then reported back to the team, and then we strategized in who is going to be another character, who are we going to add, and what's our strategy for the next day. And so we did that for 6 days, and that was it. That was the end. Then that was the end of production.
Who were you assigned to cover?
I floated a little bit. I covered a lot of Steven, and when Renee emerged, I started covering Renee a lot. I was also shooting some of the interviews we shot in that interview room. I had a little bit the liberty to pop in and out where I thought it was important for me to be there. As soon as Renee came, I spent a lot of time with him. Then later, when the race was really on, I covered a lot of Steven until the very end.
You're not able to see everything, and you're talking to your fellow folks at the end of the night. Was it ever a surprise for you when you sat down and watched the finished film or the rough cut and saw all of the other pieces that fell into place?
Yeah, there were surprises. There were, surprises in that there were moments that I thought when I experienced them were really, really strong that didn't make the cut. We cut for over a year, and we had at some point a really strong 4.5-hour assembly, like a rough cut. That was like a gripping film, and that could have been a film, but it was obviously too long. We had to cut it down. So it was, at times painful process to make it shorter, and a lot of beautiful moments and side stories sort of were left on the cutting room floor. I wasn't there for the very first time Steven gave a speech. I don't know why, but I missed that one. And when I saw that first, it was incredibly powerful, and I was surprised how strong he was. And then there were surprises in for example, I hadn't seen the drama in the beginning when Steven was going around trying to get votes. I knew there was a drama, but the way it was cut was just so brilliant and so beautiful with the expected sort of the lead up to it. And I thought overall the film was cut in such a smart, beautiful way that to me it had a lot of surprises in that how gripping the story was told. Because over the week when you experience it, it's a very long-winded process, and there's lots of dull moments in between, but seeing it sort of compressed to this storyline that they chose to follow, it was wonderful to see.
What are you working on now?
So I finished the documentary recently about the frontline medical workers in New York City during the first wave of COVID. And I spent about 4 or 5 months in the hospitals in New York. It's a film directed by Matt Heinemann. We're about to be done. We're doing color grading next week for it. It's a beautiful, beautiful film. It's going to premiere at one of the upcoming film festivals, and I'm really excited about that film to hit the world because it was one of the most traumatic and deep and emotional experiences in my career, to be able to be so up close to something so traumatic. And that's coming out. And yeah, tomorrow I'm going to see Pete Buttigieg and his husband Chasten filming the end of a film that's also almost done about their presidential run. And I think I might be off to a new project very soon that I cannot speak about, as I signed all these non-disclosure agreements that the lawyers would come after me.
Mr. Thielow, thank you so much for your time. This was great talking with you.
Awesome. Amazing. Thank you for your time. I'm so glad you're doing this. This is wonderful.
If you enjoy this show and want more people to know about it, head on over to iTunes, leave a comment, and rate it 5 stars. Make sure you like and share us on Facebook, and don't forget to follow us on Twitter. Just search for Christopher Media. Thank you in advance for supporting Christopher Media by clicking on the PayPal button and by clicking through to all the sponsors who support ChristopherMedia.net. Most importantly, we would like to take the time to extend an extra special thanks to you. Christopher Media could not exist without your support. Thank you for visiting ChristopherMedia.net, and thank you for listening. Christopher Media. Let's make some noise.